Hey VC, this is Harvey and welcome back to Spinning the Black Circle. I hope that you, yes, you sitting there, are well and doing good things. This is episode 1 of 16 in a brand new series, which I'm pulling together where I'm going to chronologically, episode by episode, talk about, review the Blue Note Classic series. And I'm talking about the first 16 tranche of the Classic series, which had a clear intent of re-releasing the commercial cream of the Blue Note catalogue. So it's always a question of judgment, your own perception, what the best Blue Note titles are. It's very subjective, but the intent of Blue Note, Don Was as president, was to breathe life into the commercial cream of that Blue Note catalogue across those initial 16 releases, which started in December 2020 and went through to towards the end of last year. And if you're just getting into jazz and or just got a turntable, then you are very lucky, because there is no better place to start, I think, in all of jazz than these first 16 titles if you're just getting into it, or certainly no better place to start in terms of Blue Note. You're getting an all analog release from the original master tapes, mastered by Kevin Gray, probably the eminent mastering engineer for vinyl in the entire world at the moment. And they are carefully curated and pressed at optimal. And they are the same price as any brand new single LP. So the packaging might be basic, just what you'd expect, and nothing fancy about it. But for the price of any brand new LP, you're getting an audiophile release of some of the greatest jazz ever recorded. So the purpose here is twofold. For those who are considering getting into jazz or just getting into it, I'm going to talk about each of those 16 releases across these episodes in turn, so I can give you a flavour of what to expect and come back to once you've maybe bought them, tried them. For connoisseurs, it might just be a point of interest to listen to what I've got to say. Disagree, obviously, where which is your prerogative, or nod your metaphorical head, where you might agree with me. So what was the first release of the Blue Note reissue series? Then it was the Sidewinder by Lee Morgan, and no surprise that they started with this, the 1964 LP that saved the Blue Note label from bankruptcy because of its commercial success. With a stellar band on this, obviously Lee Morgan as band leader on trumpet. Then you had possibly one of, if not my favourite saxophonist, Joe Henderson on sax, with a tremendous symbiotic performance on this. An interplay between him and Lee Morgan is something else. Then something that's less heralded on this, but just as important as the rhythm section, Barry Harris on piano. Then Bob Cranshaw on bass, Billy Higgins on drums, and particularly that rhythm section of bass and drums of Cranshaw and Higgins is just such a solid bass on this LP, and I'll come on and talk about that a bit later. But the main thing this LP is known for is the title track, the Sidewinder, 24 chorus hard bop tune. You've definitely heard it. It's as omnipotent as So What by Miles Davis. It's everywhere. It's been on car commercials, but sticking a pair of headphones on and listening to that on this all analog vinyl issue is something else. And that's the track on here that I don't necessarily say it's even the best track on here, but it's certainly the most commercial. But it's where you can most clearly hear that interplay between Morgan and Henderson on this, and almost this kind of friendly competition between them on the soloing to kind of outplay each other. But that's a tremendous first tune. Then there's no let up. Totem Pole, the second tune, is a laid back Latin tune. I think that's where the Cranshaw Higgins rhythm section really kicks in, and the strength of their unity on that. They really connect. And then the solos on this are probably the best on this release for me. You've got the attack of the Lee Morgan first trumpet solo, and then when Henderson comes in, he's more, I would say, more relaxed and lyrical in his solo. Then it passes to the busy Barry Harris piano solo, then finishes off with a solo from from Lee Morgan, one of the solos of his career for me on Totem Pole from Lee Morgan on the second track. And then Gary's Notebook is the third track, which is about Lee Morgan's neighbour, who was apparently an intellectual and an academic, and so that feeds thematically to Gary's Notebook as a tune, because it's a blues tune, but there's lots of complexity in it. I think the complexity is meant to reflect the intellectualism of Lee Morgan's neighbour Gary. So that's Gary's Notebook. One of the things I love about this tune is that there's this accentuated part in the rhythm section where the piano, bass, and drums hit these notes together under the rhythm. That happens 4 or 5 times during a tune. It's just something to listen out for, because it's an unusual little motif, and it's a really gorgeous little nuance of that tune. So that's Gary's Notebook. Then you've got Boy What a Night, which is like a funky church blues. The thing that sticks out for me on this is Henderson's solo, and how he's so confident on sax that he eases into it by playing the first 2 notes a couple of times and not kind of showing off at the start of the solo. Then he just draws it out into this languid, funky solo. So that's Boy What a Night. And then you've got it's bookended by Hocus Pocus, which is probably my least favourite tune on here, because it's only because it's kind of light and it's not as challenging as the other tunes. This isn't a challenging album at all across the board. It's not a difficult LP to listen to, but I just think Hocus Pocus is a little bit more lightweight than the tunes that preceded it. But it's an obvious closing tune in how it plays out. But this LP overall, devastatingly great. It's no surprise that it's too good for it not to have been commercially successful, which it clearly was. It's gorgeous, full of life, a great place to start if you haven't heard a single jazz LP. If you were sitting in a room with someone and said, should I get into jazz, what should I listen to? I'd probably start with this, actually. I hear a lot of people saying, well, it's this or Kind of Blue as a starting album in the genre for me. I would say because Love Supreme, bit too angular, a bit too difficult to be a first jazz listener. If you haven't heard a single jazz LP from start to finish, I think that Love Supreme, as amazing it is going to be too challenging for a first jazz listen. So if you're literally brand new to jazz, this is not a bad place to start. And if you've got a record player and are into vinyl and you want to get into jazz, then just get it, because it's an all analog, fantastic release. Are there better versions of this? The only other versions I've heard are the 75th anniversary digitally sourced version, which is I've got that and it's nowhere near as good as this brand new all analog cut. But I've heard good things about the Music Matters release of this, but that will cost you many multiples of this. So unless it's startlingly ahead of this, then I would say this is a great place to start. It's difficult to imagine this LP sounding that much better than it already does on this final release. In terms of the pressing, there were some problems early on at Optimal in Germany with this Blue Note reissue label, which I think have been ironed out. So if this isn't on its first pressing now, which I don't think it is, you might be all right now if you haven't bought it. There were a few of the early Blue Note releases on this series of 16 that I did have to send back and replace because there was some quality control issues at Optimal, which are well reported online. But you should be okay now, and if you're not, you just send it back and get another copy, right? And it's worth persevering with this reissue series because it's so damn good. So there you have it then. By no means exhaustive of what I could have said about this initial Blue Note release, but that's episode 1. Please like, comment, subscribe if you're not already done so, and I'll be back very, very shortly with episode 2 in this Blue Note Classic series. Until then, bye.